Everyone is upset at Ledger, including myself. The assumption has always been that the private keys do not leave this device, but Ledger just made an announcement for Ledger Recover, where if a user updates their firmware and opts in, the private keys can in fact leave the device. And the reason a user would want this is because they may not feel comfortable securing their private keys. But this still kind of goes against the whole point of a hardware wallet. The whole point is that the private keys should never leave the device. So if a user does update their firmware and opt in for this Ledger Recover service, their private keys will be split up into 3 encrypted shards and sent to 3 different custodians. So what am I doing? The first thing is I'm not panicking and I'm not making any rash decisions. Currently, as I make this video, May 18th, 2023, the crypto on my ledger is safe. In order for this feature of my private keys being extracted from Ledger, I would need to update my firmware to 2.21 and opt in for the service. So I'm not going to update the firmware. And people are saying, but you still have to opt in after. But that's kind of meaningless because once you update the firmware, it means that the capability is there, whether you opt in or don't opt in for the Ledger Recovery service. And Ledger Recovery is currently only for Ledger Nano X, the device that I'm holding in my hand here. This is the OG Ledger Nano S. So at the moment, it's not possible. So at the moment, this device to me is the safer option. But who knows in the future if Ledger will add this feature to Ledger Nano S as well. But for my Ledger Nano X, I will not be updating the firmware. But the thing about these wallets is eventually we'll have to update the firmware. If you don't update firmware for years and years, it doesn't really work. So I do think in the future, I may have to consider switching to a new wallet. And everyone is looking into new wallets, but the thing about any wallet is they can update the firmware as well. Grid Plus, another hardware wallet, tweeted, hypothetically, we could introduce new firmware that would allow private key export, but we just don't. And Trezor could do the same thing as well, but here's the difference. If Trezor updated their firmware with this possibility of extracting the private keys, everyone would see it because it is open source. When we look at Ledger, the firmware is not open source. So in the future, whether Ledger says they did something or didn't do something, there's no way for us to verify. And although Ledger firmware is closed source, Ledger was able to rise to the top of the hardware wallet market because since their inception, there have been no hacks due to the hardware. And also, it's very easy to use. So right now, without updating the firmware on my X, the crypto is safe, but this one again that I'm holding here, this is the Ledger Nano S. This does not have the capability. So for now, this is safe as well. But like I said earlier, eventually we have to update the firmware. That's just how technology works. So I may be switching to another wallet in the future. Trezor has always been my second option. But who knows, maybe in the future it becomes my first option. But right now, May 18th, 2023, I'm not panicking, making any rash decisions. I will look to see how things go over the next few weeks before I make my next decision. And I want to know what you guys are doing in the comments down below. And let me know what you think right now is the best hardware wallet.